Good evening, everyone, and welcome to number 17 of our CAWASA series of webinars. I think I have to revert to my slides, so just give me a second. I'm just trying to tidy up. I think we have about 20 persons now, so we're gonna make a start. Just let me get back to my slides here. Okay. So we are at number 17 of our series of webinars, which I called Water Operators Partnerships, Utilities Helping Each Other in the Fight Against Climate Change. What I have presented you with this afternoon is the typical photograph which many people who visit our shores know us by, that we are just this idyllic setting where you sit on the beach or chill out in your boats and have your rum and coke or other beverages on the beach. And this is how most of the Caribbean is sold now, because we have moved out from economies that traditionally depended on agriculture for centuries before, which brought us to where we are. And so the transition moved from agricultural to trade and services, particularly tourism. But then no one ever thinks of a situation like this one. So this is what we have, at least for the 6 months of the year. And we have had to learn to live within that space. And traditionally, if we look back at hurricanes, that since they began tracking them since about 1851 until the photo I have there is that of 2016 update, which shows the track out of Africa onto the Eastern Caribbean, which is all completely hidden. And you see the patterns going across to the United States and to the rest of North America. It tells us that we're in one of the most vulnerable locations on the planet from natural disasters, particularly hurricanes. And over the years, we have suffered since that time, and yet Caribbean people still live in this part of the world. We have not moved. A few of us, we have many people who have moved, but I don't think necessarily because of storm events. But we have learned to build back and build back better. And there must be something that we are doing as Caribbean people to still remain in such a vulnerable part of the world. And this is what I thought we should be presenting this afternoon as we move on. And as we can see already, for this year, the situation, though we didn't have any direct hits in most of the Caribbean so far, and let us keep our fingers crossed for, I think, the Cayman and Cuba, where I think it is now Delta is heading. And this year we have exhausted all 21 named events from, I think it was from Arthur, as I've listed here, from Arthur all the way down to Wilfred. And the NOAA have started using the Greek alphabet system to name new storms. So you will notice to the right of the map, just north of Africa, where we have Alpha. And I think the one that is now going to affect some parts of the northwestern Caribbean is Delta. And that is how severe the storm pattern has been this year. But fortunately, as I said, we have not had any severe hits in the Caribbean, albeit yesterday and some days gone, we've had some rains, and typical, we need to replenish our water supply systems. But overall, we can knock wood that we have not had a direct hit in any of the Caribbean territories thus far. And just to give you the listing of the Greek alphabet system, that is when we have exhausted the 21 in the regular alphabet. And you see it begins from Alpha to Omega. And that is how busy our part of the world has been with tropical cyclone events. Now, takes us to what we mean by climate change. And as per the textbook definition, it means a change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of global atmosphere, and which is in addition to natural climate variability observed over comparable time periods. Now, there is a difference between climate change or climate and weather. And with weather, you will notice it is about precipitation, that is rainfall, etc. And you have clouds, you have winds, and humidity, temperature, you collect all of that information. And over a period of time, you can have a sort of weather patterns. And it is a way of, understanding what takes place in the environment where you are. And then we have climate, where you collect all the statistics about the weather, and the climate gives you the sort of average pattern over a longer period of time. So just for the benefit of you who may not have, had a lot to deal with it, but many of you have heard a lot about climate change, and I'm just trying to give you just a quick overview, because that can be an exercise in itself. And so if you put that over a long period of time, the climate, it will give us, say, over 100 years, you can really have a pattern of weather activities over a period of time, and that gives you climate. And the change is whether you have weather patterns are changing, where we are speaking now of, because of increased temperatures, and we're going to see now the possibilities of sea level rise. And there are countries that are already recording some of these changes, even in our Caribbean region, where many of our islands and other coastal states such as Guyana and Suriname, where in some places at once where there were mangroves way out into the coastline which protected, in some cases a lot of that have been completely eroded. And we are seeing, and there have been studies showing where coastal areas have been eroded owing to adverse weather conditions. And it is believed to also be because of sea level rise. And so climate change, it is believed, if we live long enough, over 100,000 years, you would eventually see that some of this may have occurred before, and we've heard studies about the ice age and the different ages on the planet. So things continue to change, and we have had to begin to monitor the impact of these changes and as they affect our livelihoods. And what the scientists are saying is that where you move, for every increase in every degree increase in temperature changes over time, we will see declining it will affect food production. It's going to affect our water supply systems. And in our case, we are beginning to see some of that because of more prolonged dry periods and droughts in the region. And in some cases, that has even pushed us to pump more water from our aquifers and puts us at the risk of saline intrusion. And of course, because of sea level rise, it will affect our water supply systems and other aspects of our ecosystems. In some parts of the world, we have seen extreme fires, forest fires, as in parts of California and Australia, and a lot of heat waves. And so we have to continue to be vigilant and to be able to plan how we mitigate these events and how we learn to live within such changing environment, and what we need to do to encourage some of the big polluters who cause the changes in global atmosphere. And so during the Paris Accord, which many of you may have heard about, the Caribbean had put up a joint mission, and one of the themes was using working with a lot of Caribbean artists. One of that little picture on the left of saying 1.5 to stay alive, that was designed, I think, by a St. Lucian painter together with the St. Lucian delegation. And there were numerous Caribbean artists, including musical performers, as well as other artists who went to France to make a presentation on behalf of the Caribbean and the small island developing states. And we were then saying that if we go and pass 1.5 in global temperatures, then our small island developing states were heavily at risk, and something had to be done quickly by the more developed polluting countries. At a recent CARICOM summit in St. Lucia, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, said that we must massively increase our ambition to advance low emission and resilient development, including addressing loss and damage from climate impacts. And we need all hands on deck to make this transformation possible. And that was a very profound statement by the UN Secretary General while addressing our heads of government in the region. And he was making that statement to support the work of the CARICOM heads at the international level, but as well as him being the Secretary General of the UN, trying to encourage the member states of the UN to do what was necessary to help to reduce the impact on citizens of the world and to help with mitigating the impacts of climate change. Now, in assessing, speaking of climate change, we have to understand how will climate change affect our region and what risk do those impacts pose on our infrastructure and our stakeholders. And there are some variables that need to be considered, such as temperature, precipitation, sea level rise, extreme weather. How is this climate variable projected to change during the next 30 years or more? Is it expected to increase or decrease? These are the types of questions that many countries now have gone to the next level of not just having a Department for Sustainable Development, but they have also introduced full ministries responsible for climate change. And these are the types of questions that they speak of mainstreaming the impact of climate change or climate change generally, so that across the ministries there are reports that are prepared annually to show where these are impacting the various sectors. Now, for vulnerability issues that impact water supply in our region, I try to give you a quick overview of some of the factors, some of these vulnerability issues such as water scheduling, particularly during the dry periods, and even in the rainy periods too, because you have high turbidity issues. But typically, we have seen some of in recent past, some countries that recorded some of these issues, well, at least prior to COVID as well. We have had severe drought events in the year 2010 in places right throughout the Caribbean, flooding, contamination and saline intrusion, turbidity problems, and landslides. There's also the impact, as I mentioned, on our tourism and infrastructure damage and sea level rise, which is predicted could amount to about $22 billion US per year by the year 2050, which is equivalent, maybe equivalent to about 10% of gross domestic product of the region. In 2017, we well remember the huge losses that we had, particularly in Dominica, and affected other parts of the region, such as Puerto Rico, the other Leeward Islands, the BVI, Antigua and Barbuda. Many of the Leeward Islands were affected by a series of hurricanes, not only Maria. I think there was Irma and Jose, which escaped much of the land, but also did create quite an impact on the coastal areas. And when you think of the progress we would have made, and when you have one strike, it takes you back sometimes 30 years to build back. The Caribbean now accounts for another vulnerability impact, is that of being water stressed. And in a study done recently, it was reported that the Caribbean, there are 7 countries in the Caribbean that account for about a group with about the world's 36 most water stressed countries. And so that is significant. These vulnerabilities worsened because of our high non-revenue water in the region, which ranges or averages between 30 and 50% across the region. Now, we have had some studies done. For example, Wallingford, HR Wallingford was commissioned to undertake a study by the Caribbean Development Bank a couple of years ago. And one of the things they tried to do was to come up with a water stress sort of index to position water stress levels in the region against a sort of scale, a climate risk index. And you can see how the water stress, as you move up the y-axis, let's say at 6, you would see some of the more water stressed countries and in context of their non-revenue water. So you're going to see, as you go, the least water scarce countries would have a lower index. And that is because they have the lower non-revenue water. As you move across that scale, you will notice Belize at 24% non-revenue water. And as you go up the scale to the Dominican Republic at 65%, the Bahamas, Dominica at 40%, and St. Lucia over 50%. And there's a lot of work going on as we speak to try to mitigate non-revenue water. We had a session this morning. It has been a series running by the CDB and the IDB with water managers in the region and some of their senior technicians in looking at aspects of non-revenue water, but it is a factor. And so HR Wallingford attempted to put this type of climate risk index in comparing the water stress levels with non-revenue water and putting an index on climate. Now, I've tried to briefly go over some cases of some of the impacts on some of the water supply systems. And some of you who visited St. Lucia during CAWASA's conference last year would have seen the John Compton Dam, or also known as the Roseau Dam, in the heart of the rainforest, which was damaged by Tropical Storm Thomas and affected by other storm events and adverse weather events. And this is the major catchment for the northern part of the island, which supplies water to perhaps over 60% of the population in the country. And the impact was some 16 inches and 26 inches of rainfall in just about 24 hours. That was in 2010. And again, there were some events during the Christmas Eve trough. But you can see to the photograph on the left, on the right, where you had major landslides that brought down trees and rocks and silted this dam. And so the estimated losses in the country because of that storm would have been somewhere near $24 million US. And this is just to give you some indication of all the pump houses and that were damaged or totally inundated by that flood. And notice the color of the water because of all the organic material that was deposited therein. And there are other photos showing you the levels of siltation. So it is a massive project to be able to desilt this facility. And here, there has been an undertaking with a loan from the Caribbean Development Bank, and as well a levy imposed on the water consumers in St. Lucia to be able to fund the desilting of this facility. So there you have the dredge on the water and the pipes that will take the water down to the sediment disposal area. And of course, some of you who were on that tour will remember the work in progress. It's still a work in progress. And, but these are just some of the impacts that you have with the adverse weather conditions that we face. The case of Hurricane Maria on Dominica, the impact on water and sanitation sector, the total recovery needs for the country was over 56, for the water sector was over $56 million US. And before that, they had also been impacted 2 years prior in 2015 by Tropical Storm Erica. And you could see the before and after, just a few samples, just 2 samples of what it was before Hurricane Maria. And there was no sign of any catchment after Hurricane Maria. And that was some scenes of damage after the devastation of 2015. And you would notice the blue water line under the bridge. And the bridge was gone completely. Along the roadsides where you have the pipelines, all of this infrastructure is lost by just one event. And when you think that you have had major investments, and it takes you back some 30 years, and there were projects I recall that were in Dominica that were just maybe about 70% complete. And in one night, you lost all of that investment and you have to start again. So these are the types of things that vulnerabilities and impact on the development of the countries that we face in our region. Of course, again, because of our theme, we mentioned some of what we hope to do and what is ongoing with our water operators and utilities helping each other in the region. And particularly after Hurricanes Erica and Maria, we saw teams moving from some of the the different territories to support their fellow operators in the countries so that you can restore water supply within the shortest possible period. We've had in the Cayman Islands, again, another low-lying island in the Northwestern Caribbean, and the impact on their water systems because of whether you have surges or wave action would get into damaging some of the water systems. And then I think it was last year or early this year, there was, yeah, it was January 2020 when there was this earthquake which rocked Cayman Islands, and they had a number of their transmission systems and water systems damaged. Again, these are all events that affect our region. Then we will recall the Christmas Eve trough that affected St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And this is some amazing work done by our operators to be able to move into places, many of which you would not even be able to drive to your motor vehicles, or with some of the pipes and other materials you need to restore the supply. Not even, you know, any type of mechanical equipment. So it's all very hard work and sleepless nights for many of you operators. And I'm sure when we get to the end of the presentation, you would be able to share some of your own experiences and how you're able to manage during those difficult periods. You literally have to be working magic with the tools that you have and the materials available to you so that we can get potable water back to the citizens and mitigate any chances of health risk to the citizens of our countries. Now, the other extreme is we move from a severe dry season, and then we get into the rainy season. And because of human activity, be it agricultural or construction, we have incidents of high turbidity in the streams and a lot of the water intakes. So it increases the cost of production of water, particularly for those water utilities that depend on surface water. And the challenges with what type of filtration systems that you use, so that you can have other impacts on your sand filters and your filter beds. Some of these photos most of these photos are compliments of our utilities, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the Wasco Dominica and Wasco in St. Lucia. Some of those I've showed, so I have to acknowledge that. Here you now have the situation, the other extreme of dry seasons and the impact of drought. And there are communities that can go days on end, sometimes weeks, without adequate water supply, and governments would have to intervene sometimes to pay for water to be trucked to communities, and it can be chaotic if it's not properly managed. So all of that type of impact you have during severe drought events, as we had in years such as 2010. So now it takes us to just describing water operators partnerships, or WOPs. Water operators partnerships are peer-to-peer support exchanges between two or more water operators carried out on a not-for-profit basis, with the objectives of strengthening their capacity, enhancing their performance, and enabling them to provide better service to more people. And the WOPs have proven to have a track record and can be highly cost effective, so that the relationships that are built between operators of the way it works is that you would have one utility that has a certain capacity, a certain skill that they have developed over the years. They would mentor another utility. And so it's a sort of exchange, and you learn from each other. And that has worked well. And that was formed by the UN Habitat. That's under the request of the former UN Secretary General, the late Kofi Annan, through the Global Water Operators Partnerships Alliance called GWOPA. That agency is a subset of it's subsumed within the UN Habitat system. And it was, over the last 10 years, it was based in, I think it was first started off in Nairobi, and for 5 years it was hosted by the government of Spain in Barcelona. And just this year, they've just now moved to Bonn as the headquarters, as Bonn has offered to be the new host city for the Global Water Operators Partnerships Alliance. And what the alliance does is to be able to bring the sort of solidarity and the peer-to-peer relationship between utilities, South-South cooperation and North-South cooperation, so that countries, let us say in the Americas, countries across in Asia, and countries doing partnerships with North-South would be partnerships with countries in Europe and with those in the Southern Hemisphere. That goal, the reason for also forming why Kofi Annan, former Secretary General, started off and caused the GWOPA to be formed, was to be able to help countries in making strides and achieving the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals. And you may have heard of this. I will not go into detail with them because that could be another lecture in itself. But it is just to get an idea that we are working towards clean water and sanitation for all. That is goal 6. And of course, water is life, and it has impact on all these, the attainment of all these other goals, particularly that the goal of sustainable cities and communities. You cannot have sustainable cities without having good quality water and sanitation. And so goal 6 directly impacts being able to attain the goal of goal 11 of the SDGs. It also will impact what happens in our marine environment, ridge to reef, etc. And what we do on the land will affect the entire food chain. But as I said, we're not going to go into that detail. But just to give you an indication of what we are trying to accomplish on the SDG 6. And it tells you, as it's summarized here, that all will have access to safe and affordable drinking water. All have access to adequate sanitation and hygiene, and open defecation is eliminated. Improve quality by reducing pollution, minimizing release of hazardous chemicals, and having the proportion of untreated wastewater. Increase the water efficiency across all sectors, ensure sustainable supply of water to reduce the number of people suffering from water scarcity. Fully implement integrated water resource management, which looks at water resources holistically. And 6.6, protect and restore water-related ecosystems, including mountains, forests, wetlands, rivers, aquifers, and lakes. So all of that, we got to have a broad knowledge of as we work in the water sector, and we work towards achieving those goals, and to ensure that all people will have access to good quality, safe water, affordable, and that we also protect the sources where we get our water from and protect our environment. And we can do that through working as partners, because some of us have made more progress than others, and we can share with others. And that is the whole idea of the water partnerships. So that under the UN Habitat, the system is that you have the Global Water Operators Partnerships Alliance. The chair of that program is the Director General of the UN Habitat. And each of the regions, for example, the WAPLAC, that is the WAP of the Latin America and the Caribbean. And in the Caribbean, we have a subset of the WAPLAC, which is CARIWAP. That is a partnership between CAWASA and the CWWA. And we work closely with the Global Water Operators Partnerships in trying to establish those twinnings and partnerships in the Caribbean region. And this is just a schema of how it works, some of the responsibilities of the two agencies. We have had representation, of course, CARIWAP as permanent representation on the International Steering Committee of the Global Water Operators Partnerships Alliance. They have the International Steering Committee, sort of like the executive, and there's the General Assembly, and of course the two institutions that look after coordinating activities for water regionally, the CWWA and CAWASA, do partner in that liaison with the international bodies and giving representation to the region. Now, some of the partnerships that have taken place, or formal memoranda of understanding, we have had between, for example, the Guyana Water Inc., GWI, and Suriname Water. They had a small water operator partnership looking at, I think it was NRW in Guyana, and I think they've had other partnerships looking at water aquifers, etc. We attempted in 2016, we had a formal framework agreement with DINEPA, that is the umbrella agency for water in Haiti. And Haiti has numerous problems, particularly after the earthquake of 2010. And when we visited there in 2015, there was still lots of signs of the challenges that they faced. And we had established this framework agreement to be able to assist and make certain interventions and peer-to-peer relations with other utilities in the region. However, some of that did not come off because of some of the political turmoil in Haiti at the time and in more recent times. So we are hoping that in due course we can restore some of those initiatives. In St. Lucia, we have had a long-standing relationship between WASCO and Hamburg WASA, looking at non-revenue water. And that has brought, it's not only a partnership that WASCO has enjoyed on its own, but the GIZ, the German Technical Institute for International Development, they have had supported other utilities who were under their program to participate in the training that took place in St. Lucia. We've had Belize, Barbados, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis. The BVI was not necessarily under the program, but they were brought in through CAWASA. In that regard, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I think I mentioned Grenada, all participated in the NRW non-revenue water exercises, including areas such as energy efficiency management, energy efficiency, SCADA systems, etc. We have with the Caribbean, and I think somewhere about 2014 or 2015 it was, that the CARIWAP, that is CWWA and CAWASA, signed a WAP agreement, an MOU, with the Pacific Water and Wastewater Association. There are many similarities to some of the issues that affect us as small island states, and they have participated in CWWA annual conferences. They have done a lot of work in benchmarking utilities in their region, and we thought along those lines there would have been some good partnerships within our regions, between our regions. There is also formally we signed the MOU between GWOPA and CARIWAP, which to formalize some of the matters, many of which were not properly documented. Somebody writing on my screen. Yeah, one of the big water operators partnerships that we have had in the region is that, and a very successful one, was that between Belize Water Services Limited and the Contra Costa Water District of California. That came at a cost of some US $100,000 that was funded by between the IDB, GWOPA, and some other agencies and some of the agencies of the US. Which lasted for about 5 years between 2010 and 2015. Some of the big results were the number of employees that were brought together, operators who completed their water operator certification because of that partnership. They taught a lot of, well, hands-on training in safety, on the job, occupational health and safety. Investments it included the Belize Water Services investing in a lot of safety equipment and the introduction of SCADA system and tariff modernization. All of that towards not only reducing non-revenue water, but creating a more efficient staff and a more efficient utility. And some of the partners had, well, on both sides, the employees from the Belize Water Services, what they said about the partnership, some of what they learned. And the number one success factor is that everybody was on board, according to one of the supervisors from Belize Water Services. And although the Contra Costa Water Department were the mentors, their staff too also got an opportunity not just to share some of what they knew with those in Belize, but they also got an opportunity to learn. Somebody has their mic on, please. Could you turn off your mic? Somebody is speaking about elections in my program, please. Thank you very much. It says that our supervisors now recognize the quality and creativity of our work, so that it shows that the teams from both sides of the mentor and the mentee were able to share some of their best practices and learn from each other. And that is what the peer-to-peer relationship helps to do. And that you can always pick up your phone because you have met a partner who has been in the trenches with you, and you have a problem and you are able to find solutions to problems. And this is priceless. The non-revenue reduction water operator partnership between Hamburg WASA and WASCO, as I indicated earlier, there were energy audits and leak detection. WASCO, the WASCO Nevis Water Department, the Belize Water Services. We included the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College in St. Lucia, so that their lecturers who dealt with, the plumbing courses at that institution were able to participate in that and could be able to pass it on onto the students at that institution. And then, of course, there was the network and hydraulic modeling, and that included the Barbados Water Authority, CWSA of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, and there was the demand management and the pilot district metering areas, the DMAs, and this one included WASCO, the WASCO, CWSA, NAWASA, and Belize Water Services. That was again held in St. Lucia. And this shows some of what took place in the actual workshops, in the classroom sessions, and doing in the field, checking on the district metering systems, and also the mapping using the SCADA systems. This is an example of the preliminary visits to Haiti to examine some of the possibilities and the issues that they had, and trying to be able to match the partners for the WAPs from the other parts of the Caribbean. So it would have been a multi-partner WAP, which would have included water utilities, PAHO, CWWA, CAWASA, and I think we had the IDB and the CDB on board. The future of WAPs in the region, the Water Operators Partnerships, we have been working on some of these, albeit, of course, some of that have been on hold owing to COVID having affected us earlier this year. So we have had to, because of travel restrictions, we are not able to follow up and continue those partnerships. But there are plans that were well on the way, and trying to mobilize funding, because one of the things about having those exchanges, we have to be able to mobilize funding from some of our international donor agencies to be able to meet some of the cost of travel between the region, and that is one of the big challenges. So as much as possible now, what we are doing is to be able to do some of that using the virtual means. And just recently we had such an exchange between WASCO, St. Lucia, and the Bahamas, having some of their experts make presentations to WASCO on some areas that they have to learn on, and the experiences that are brought to bear by the Bahamas technical people. There's one that our partner at the WAPLAC headquarters in Argentina has been working on between Trinidad and Tobago, to establish a WAP between Trinidad and Tobago and possibly the Bahamas WSC and Jamaica NWC, looking at governance and non-revenue water issues. That is again a work that is well away in project. There's funding for that, but we have to await when the borders are open for us to be able to make those moves. So it takes me down to, what do we mean by resilience? And when I started, I said that we have, and I showed you the maps of what has happened, and we have been devastated time after time. And it shows way back since they've been recording hurricanes that we have been bombarded with hurricane after hurricane annually for the near 200 years. And people are still here in the region, and we still continue to thrive. And it is about bouncing back or building back better. And the whole idea of resilience is to be able to cope with and recover from disruption, and to be able to anticipate the trends and variability in order to maintain our services. So that is what we should be looking at doing. That how do we cope when there is an event? How we help, how quickly we are able to recover. And during the 2017 events in Dominica and some of the other islands. I mean, within a short period of time, notwithstanding all the challenges that were thrown at the operators in Dominica, they were able within short order to be able to restore water supply to so many communities. And that must be commended. And then when they were going to be burnt out, you had to be able to get support for them to be able to continue restoring supplies. And the other main factor is that you have to be able to anticipate the future. And because you know what the trends have been, you can plan for them. And so this is where we have been trying to get all utilities, and most of you have already have in place proper disaster management plans. Through the Wallingford, HR Wallingford study that was commissioned by the CDB, they also try to put it in terms of the water risk 3 pillars. That is having an enabling environment, the watershed and water resources management, that's the second pillar, and then the water supply system. Under the enabling environment, you have to be able to enable environment guides and promotes a proactive approach to the integration of climate resilience. On the watershed and water resources management, water resources availability and watershed management practices can cope with climate variability. And the water supply systems, that the water supply systems can manage services on the emerging trends in climate variability. And they produced a manual that many of the utilities participated in those workshops in helping to be able to undertake the disaster vulnerability risk, and also disaster vulnerability risk assessment. I think WASCO had undertaken one of those themselves, but I think a work like this was also done by this study undertaken by the commission by the CDB. And so that the next phase is for the utilities to have worked to plan, have a mitigation plan, as well as to be able to cope. And what are the things that you're going to do? Because we have to learn to live with some of the challenges that we face. But it is what we do during the times of crisis and how we help to maintain and sustain our livelihoods through all of these challenges. And so through the CWWA, after a few iterations at various CWWA conferences, we were able to develop what is called the Regional Strategic Action Plan for Governance and Building Climate Resilience in the water sector in the Caribbean. And under this RSAP for short, as we call it, it is to be able to have there is an action plan that has already been developed, and we have been working towards the implementation of this action plan with our utilities. We did try to present that at the various CWWA conferences to the various stakeholders, and there's a lot of work in progress as we speak. What it seeks to do is, I think you may not be able to read the various pillars as it's presented here, but it looks at one of the first pillars being climate resilient water governance, climate informed decision support, climate resilient water resources management, climate resilient water services provision, and capacity building and sensitization for climate resilience. Now, under component 5, capacity building and public education for climate resilience, that is where directly CAWASA gets involved. And we have continued to do exactly that, which is our premier mandate at CAWASA, to do the capacity building and public education with our utilities and particularly through our operators through such programs. The next thing that has happened under this program is the IDB and the IDB Invest, that is the investment arm of the Inter-American Development Bank, has contracted a consulting group, K&M Advisors and Alliance, an insurance grouping, for the development of a Caribbean water utility insurance company. And the acronym there is QUIC, Caribbean Water Utility Insurance Company. And it is supposed to be a type of mutual insurance company that will be owned by the water utilities in the region and with support from the IDB and the CDB. So that's a work in progress. And we hope that at the high-level forum of the CWWA during the virtual conference that's taking place from October 19th to the 23rd, that this will be presented again, the progress that has been made towards establishing this insurance vehicle for increasing resilience of the water utilities in the region. So we are moving beyond just writing and talking about it, but trying to get action. And so one of the components of that insurance would be to look at a response program, which will provide support for early recovery assistance among participating water utilities. And this is critical because pretty much what we have ongoing now is sort of ad hoc, not very well coordinated approach to giving response to utilities that have been affected by disaster events or severe or catastrophic events. So one of the first components will be to be able to fund that component. So I think the power utilities of, like, say, Carolec, they have an established system where each country that is participating, or each utility that participates in the system, they would have their crews already trained for themselves if they have an event, what has to be done, what is the response plan, and if they would have to delegate a team to go support an affected utility, how that will work out, who coordinates that, and these types of things are being put together in the whole plan. And of course, funding of the travel and accommodation. Usually, when you have such a devastating event, you know, it's always difficult for a utility that's devastated even to be able to host anyone coming to support. So you want to have a plan, and you want to be able to have funding that can take care of it, because the affected utility would be topsy-turvy trying to solve a lot of these problems and being in dire straits itself. Just forgive me, I think I went. And the second component of the program, or the utility, the insurance company, is that to do with the insurance itself. It's going to be what is called a parametric insurance system, so that it's not going to be, if you have a storm that is of a certain magnitude, it would trigger a payment, or a claim and a payment. And that will be brought into detail as we go on. But I just thought I should give you a heads up of the work that is ongoing in that regard to help our utilities. And of course, we who work with the utilities, we know what the plan is. So it is in doing, building resilience, in building back better, you have to look at all the options that will help to keep you, to make you sustainable. And so this is where we are. These are just a few of the things that have been done. I trust that this has been helpful to you. I don't know if you have any questions at this stage. I'll see how best I can answer them. Thank you very much. Hi.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, very timely presentation, and let me just say, well done on it. I just want to ask a question, and
Sure.
I guess other people from within the group might be able to answer. As per the specific countries, if anyone know what is happening in their country with regards to making the utilities climate change resilient as per single countries.
Yeah, anyone? I think Derek was asking if anyone has any information on what's happening in their specific utilities towards building climate resilience. What I can say to you, Derek, is that I don't know of all the details of what is going on, but I can certainly tell you one of the things that through the CWWA and some of the other partners, the IDB, CDB, and there are other organizations and international donors who have supported CWWA in coming up with this regional strategic action plan for building climate resilience and governance, because governance is one of the big challenges of our utilities in the region. Still a lot of governance issues to overcome. One of the things we did in building up towards where we are now, we had presented, there was a white paper that was presented to the various governments. The CDB itself, as I said, had done some work, had invested in many of the utilities so that they would have done the disaster vulnerability assessments. I think as well, the IDB has also done some similar work with their borrowing member countries. One of the things too in the region, a lot of the borrowing member countries of the IDB, they would have had that type of support from the IDB. And again, through CWWA, and I think it was about 2015, we brought together lots of the operators to the pre-conference workshops of the CWWA. And one of those was about building a climate resilient water sector in the Caribbean, looking at strategies for water utilities. During that time, we had I think one of the US agencies at the time gave quite a bit of support to the region in working on that. And in fact, while we were doing, building that, developing that, well, during that workshop, I think the morning after when we were presenting the ministers, it is when we were seeing the footage from Dominica of the devastation by Tropical Storm Erica. So this is, a lot of work is ongoing. I know, for example, in Dominica, of course, you know, the Dominican government had declared Dominica would have become a climate resilient country. And there was a lot of investment in that regard after Hurricane Maria, trying to build the country back better and putting lots of systems in place. So that's what I can say from my end. I see that someone was asking about, is it about reducing non-revenue water is one of the measures? Yes, indeed. And as I said this morning, there was the final of a non-revenue trading workshop that was held for the water managers. And one of the things it brought out to the fore was that of sort of looking at the economic analysis of looking at non-revenue water and the cost of the measures that have to be taken for undertaking some of the corrective actions to reduce non-revenue water in the utilities. And so that went pretty well, and I think they're now going to look towards drilling down into working with more of the technical teams, and which is why I tried to, well, we at CAWASA tried to bring out to you, the operators, some of what is taking place. And as we did at the our conference last year, we know that, of course, a lot of these things happen at the high level, but you, the operators, who are the ones on the ground, have to understand these issues, or at least to have knowledge that some things are taking place, because eventually you are the ones who do the nuts and bolts and must know what is taking place, and you would have your input in how to make these things happen. Any questions, comments? Okay, sounds like most people are looking to get home. Well, thank you all again for your participation. As usual, we will be sending you the recording of the presentation, and we will keep in touch. I think next week we're going to have another exciting session, which will be looking at one of these areas to do with the technologies used in transforming the water systems, and we're going to have someone looking at SCADA systems and some of the other technologies. So I'm going to send you before the week is over, our next webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation in our number 17 Wednesday webinar from CAWASA. Have a good evening, everyone.